Hello, welcome to the channel Why Stories. Enjoy watching.
Confused about the floor, the woman decided to walk instead. And, by accidentally overhearing her fiancé's words, she almost slid down the wall in shock. Eva rushed out of the apartment in a hurry. She had overslept and was running late for work. Thankfully, Vito was so considerate, he made her coffee and a hot sandwich with cheese, ham, and tomatoes, just the way she liked it. Eva grabbed a quick bite on the go. There was an important meeting today, and she couldn't afford to be late. She kissed Vito goodbye, as usual. He gently hugged her around the waist, looked into her eyes with that piercing gaze that always sent chills down her spine, and wished her a good day. He didn't need to go to work until later, so he wasn't in a rush. Eva smiled at her beloved and slipped out of the apartment. Vito had already once been her savior. He was always encouraging, supportive, and knew just the right words to say. With him, Eva felt easy and calm. She almost forgot about Andre. He had his own life now. Their paths had separated. It was time to stop thinking about him altogether. She hurried down the stairs, deciding not to wait for the elevator. It was always busy at this time of day. The building had many apartments, lots of neighbors, and it was much quicker to walk. It wasn't until she reached the parking lot behind the building that Eva suddenly realized she had mixed up the days. The important meeting wasn't today, it was tomorrow. Eva stopped. Of course, it had been rescheduled, that's why she set the alarm for a little later. So, she hadn't overslept after all, she had woken up as planned. Frustrated, Eva kicked a small stone in front of her, as if it were to blame for everything. She glanced at her watch. She still had plenty of time. She could go back, have a relaxed coffee with Vito, chat with him about something, discuss how the treatment for the guy was going. Vito didn't like to talk about this topic. He always tried to change the subject, closed himself off, but Eva needed to know what the future held for them. Vito was her closest and dearest person, and everything that happened to him directly concerned her as well. Fortunately, it seemed that he was getting better. Vito's treatment had required a significant sum of money. He managed to find part of it on his own, and Eva offered to help with the rest. And she did so from the heart. She would have done even more to help him. Vito didn't refuse, thanked Eva for a long time, and assured her that he would definitely pay her back once he got better. He never went into detail about the diagnosis, just said that some genetic disease had been triggered. It was affecting his heart. There was treatment, and it was quite effective, but expensive. She had the money, a decent sum in her bank account. She earned well, working as a lawyer in an oil company. To be completely honest, it was her father who got her the job right after university. Eva doubted she would have made it to such a popular place without experience and connections. But after that, she really proved herself. She worked tirelessly. She learned on the go and wasn't afraid of any task. In the end, she earned herself a reputation as a diligent professional and received a promotion. Eva had everything needed for a prosperous life. First and foremost, a loving family, her mom and dad. They always had warm and friendly relationships. Eva knew that if anything happened, her parents would never leave her in trouble. This sense of a reliable support system gave her confidence and strength for future accomplishments. Secondly, when Eva graduated from university, her father gave her a gift, her very own apartment in a prestigious part of the city. However, she wasn't in a hurry to move in. She didn't like the idea of living alone. She preferred to live with her parents, at least for a while. At first, the gift from her father, the beautiful, stylishly furnished apartment, made Eva happy. She even jumped for joy when her parents handed her the keys. But sometime later, that apartment played an unpleasant role in her life. However, Eva didn't like to remember that. Now, she and Vito lived in a rented apartment. They split the rent and household expenses. Well, almost half. Eva contributed more since she had a good job and a stable income. Vito worked in a repair crew, and his income fluctuated depending on the number and volume of orders. Eva was most afraid of repeating her experience with Andre. She really didn't want to lose Vito in the same way. That's why she tried not to focus on financial issues. And Vito seemed to take everything more easily. He was generally a laid-back person. That's probably the right word to describe his personality. Eva called the elevator, eagerly anticipating her soon-to-be meeting with her beloved, and pressed the button. Vito would surely be happy to see her. His eyes always lit up with a special spark when they met. Vito enjoyed spending time with her. He often told her so, and it was clear from his behavior. The elevator stopped too quickly. The doors slid open, and Eva saw the large number 5 painted on the wall. She was on the 5th floor, but her apartment was on the 8th. The girl stepped out of the elevator with a determined stride, deciding not to take it any further. She'd rather walk. The elevator in their building had been acting up lately. Sometimes it got stuck between floors, and sometimes, like now, it took her to the wrong place. It was better to take the stairs, less risky, and healthier. Eva started to climb and suddenly heard Vito's voice. He was talking to someone on the landing over the phone. She decided to surprise her beloved, sneak up on him, and unexpectedly pop out from the stairs right onto the landing. Vito loved those kinds of pranks. But suddenly, Eva heard something that made her stop and listen closely. Vito said a phrase that couldn't be ignored. It was hard to understand the full meaning, of course. Eva couldn't hear Vito's conversation partner. But the unknown second person seemed to be trying to talk Vito out of his plan. And Vito was arguing, resisting, proving he was right. He kept presenting new facts that clarified the situation and made Eva shiver with fear. It felt like a nightmare. It all seemed too unreal. But it was impossible not to believe what was happening. There he was, Vito, standing on the landing, saying such horrible words. The conversation ended. Vito slammed the door and disappeared into the apartment, while Eva. Of course, she didn't go back home. Not now. She needed to think, figure out what to do next. Eva suddenly realized her legs could hardly support her, and she sat right on the step, not even considering that she was wearing her fancy light-colored pants today. Eva met Vito at a local rock bar. That evening, her friends dragged her out to unwind, to have some fun, to take her mind off the gloomy thoughts about Andre. Eva thought that between them, there were real feelings, sincere, strong, deep. Everything pointed to that. She had known Andre since high school, but their romance began only in their 3rd year of university. They had just run into each other in a club, recognized each other, were happy to see one another, started talking, and hadn't parted ways until that fateful day. Eva was studying at a prestigious law faculty, while Andre was tackling engineering school. He had been smart since school, good at math, and absolutely loved physics. For Eva, these subjects were like a foreign language. Andre had helped her many times during exams and with homework. Eva considered him a very nice guy, but too shy and modest. That evening in the club, she learned that Andre had been in love with her for a long time, that his feelings were very strong. Eva's head spun a little, a smile played on her face. She definitely liked what Andre was saying. Just as much as how he looked at her, with a loving gaze full of admiration and adoration. They started dating. At first, everything was just wonderful. Eva was getting to know Andre all over again and falling more and more in love with him. Reliable, very caring, loving, sensitive, handy. Andre had been raised by his mother alone, so from a young age, he had to take on all the masculine responsibilities in the family. That's how he learned everything. Andre was mature for his age, very smart and kind, and more than once, Eva saw him helping someone. Just like that, without being asked. He saw that someone needed support and gave it. It was in his nature. He would help push a car or put a heavy bag in the trunk. And all this for complete strangers. It was like nothing, just a casual thing. Andre treated Eva very tenderly, trying to anticipate her needs. He often told her how much he loved her. Their relationship could have been called perfect if it weren't for one but. This didn't happen immediately, but after some time. At first, Eva tried to ignore it, but over time, it became harder to do so. The problem was the huge financial disparity between them. Eva was the daughter of fairly wealthy parents. Andre's mother worked as a cleaner from morning until late at night, taking on several jobs to support her children. Andre was the oldest, and he had 3 younger sisters whom he had been looking after since his teenage years. Andre had been working since he was about 13, as no one would hire him before that. He washed cars, helped unload trucks, took any odd jobs he could to help his mother. While studying at the institute, he started working part-time at a design bureau related to his field. He was gaining experience and helping his mother financially. After graduating, he immediately became a full-time employee at the bureau. But his salary didn't particularly impress him. Of course, Andre couldn't provide Eva with the lifestyle she was used to. This made him feel very self-conscious. Eva didn't need those constant trips to clubs and restaurants or expensive trinkets. She knew what was truly important. The main thing was to have a person by your side who understood and supported you, someone with whom you felt so comfortable, so calm, and so good. Andre gave her a sense of peace. Eva, of course, wanted to show Andre the world. He hadn't really had the chance to travel anywhere. She could easily afford to pay for a trip for both of them, but Andre rejected every offer she made. He even refused to accept a trip as a birthday gift. Eva, it's already hard for me because of the difference in our incomes. Do you want to crush me completely? Andre asked bitterly. He felt very uncomfortable at that moment, and Eva could see it. She really wanted to ease the awkwardness, but all her attempts only made the situation worse. Such dialogues periodically arose between them, even though the girl tried very hard to avoid them. Andre's silly stereotype was preventing them from enjoying life. According to his firm belief, it was the man's responsibility to provide for a woman. He had to, end of story. And Andre was working toward this. He worked hard, moving up the career ladder. His income was growing, of course, but it still wasn't enough. The young people were still happy. They saw each other almost every evening, took walks, talked a lot, discussed their days, laughed together. Over time, he gradually replaced everything and everyone for Eva. She didn't even enjoy meeting her friends that much anymore. None of them understood her the way Andre did. Eva later scolded herself for starting the conversation. She knew how loved ones reacted to such things. That evening, they were walking in the park. He was sharing his plans. He had been offered a position at another company. A lower rank, but a higher salary and better prospects. Andre was hesitant because he had already started an important project at his current job and didn't want to abandon it completely. Eva listened attentively to her beloved, assured him that she would accept any decision he made, and that Andre knew best what to do in this situation. Her thoughts, however, were occupied with something else. She was preparing to make an important proposal to Andre. She wanted to live with him as a family, to fall asleep and wake up together, to take care of each other. They had been together for a long time, and they were both adults. Yet, they still lived in separate homes. They were dating like teenagers, honestly. Eva felt like it was time for them to grow up a bit. Andre, how would you feel about living together? She finally asked. She knew that such proposals should come from the young men, but Andre was too focused on his career. He was also planning to start his own business. So, his mind was likely occupied with such serious thoughts, which is why he hadn't yet considered living together. I really want that, too. Andre stopped, took Eva's face in his hands. It was a gentle, tender gesture. Eva loved it when he did that. But you know, this isn't exactly the best time. I'm working to make sure our future family has the money it needs, but I'm not ready yet. And it's hard for me to say this, so. Andre, I want to be with you all the time. We go on dates like school kids, and then we return to our childhood rooms at our parents' homes. But we're adults, I want more. I can't afford to rent an apartment right now. Andre lowered his gaze. He was once again ashamed that he wasn't able to provide a decent life for himself and his beloved. You know, I'm saving every penny for the business. I have this idea. If it works out, the profit will be more than decent, and everything will be fine for us. I don't want to be happy in some distant future. Eva pulled away from Andre, starting to get angry. She thought her beloved would be happy to support her idea. And besides, why complicate things by renting an apartment? I already have an apartment, a beautiful, big, spacious one. Just imagine how happy we could be there. Your apartment, your car, your money. Andre also started to boil with frustration. Eva realized that she had touched a sensitive spot again, but the words were already out. You're always reminding me of who I am, making me feel like I'm not good enough for you. That's not true. I love you, you know that. I just don't understand why we can't live together in my apartment right now, while you're still getting started. What's wrong with that? I don't want to feel like a kept man, living off a woman who's in love with him. Is that so hard to understand? You're driving me crazy. Eva was amazed at herself. Her frustration with Andre's silly principles seemed to have built up over time, and now it was pouring out. How can't you understand? I don't care about your money, I don't care at all, it's such a small thing. It's not a small thing, Andre shook his head. There was pain and sadness in his eyes. You know, it's really hard for me to overcome this financial barrier between us. There is no barrier, Eva kept shouting. You've made it all up, built some obstacles in your head, and you don't even realize that it doesn't matter. It does matter. A man is supposed to be a provider, a man is supposed to support the family. No, these are outdated stereotypes. No, Andre shook his head. Eva was so angry at him in that moment. She was ready to lash out at him with her fists, to knock some sense into his head about the roles of men and women. Everything was so good between them. They loved each other, understood each other, supported each other. Eva knew for sure that relationships like theirs were rare. And now Andre was ruining everything because of these beliefs in his head. Eva, Andre looked into her eyes. I've realized it for a long time, we're just different. What nonsense, what are you talking about? Eva blinked in confusion. She immediately understood that this was serious. It wasn't just a quarrel, not a typical conflict between them that would end soon and everything would go back to normal. I don't want to ruin your life. You deserve more. It's still unclear how all my attempts to achieve something in this life will end. And you need to live in the here and now. Andre, Eva exclaimed, gripping his hand, are you leaving me? I'm just stepping aside, the guy said, lowering his eyes, to not get in the way. You need someone else, someone better. Eva was overwhelmed with emotions, her vision even blurred for a moment. Andre had said something terrible, something unimaginable. He was leaving her. But what about her? She had just suggested living together, in her apartment, so they wouldn't have to part, so they could feel like a family. Maybe he had been lying all along. Maybe he had never loved her. The financial difference was just an excuse to leave her because he had grown tired of her. Eva's breath caught in her throat. It all ended with Andre tightly hugging her and holding her in his arms until she regained her composure. Then he apologized and called a taxi for her. That was the end. It was over between them. Just like that, strangely and unexpectedly for Eva. Apparently, Andre had been thinking about the breakup for a long time. Eva physically missed him, his scent, his touch, his voice. It was a good thing her vacation had just started. She couldn't have worked in such a state. She spent whole days in her room, eating only occasionally at her mother's insistence, not even turning on the TV or picking up a book. Eva's friends, the ones she had sacrificed spending time with for Andre, came to visit her. They turned out to be the ones who truly cared about her. They supported her, encouraged her, tried to distract her. Come on, forget about him. It's actually good that he left, Sarah assured her. You really are different. Where is he, and where are you? Andre is right, he's a loser. You'll have a million guys like Andre, Nina chimed in. Eva stayed silent, not arguing. She knew that she wouldn't find another Andre. He was one of a kind. One day, her friends finally managed to drag Eva out to a bar, despite her protests. From mutual acquaintances, Eva knew that Andre had thrown himself into work, was working at a new company, and building a business. He had lost weight, wasn't talking to anyone, and didn't have a new passion. Strangely enough, this made Eva happy. It would have been harder for her to find out that Andre left her for someone else. That evening, the bar was lively and crowded. Her friends first listened to a local rock band in the largest hall, and then they smoothly moved to the karaoke area. The atmosphere here was like that of a house party. People were sitting on soft beanbags and comfortable poofs, laughing, talking, and singing along with those at the microphone. Strangers were chatting like old friends. It was always like this here. That's why her friends loved this rock bar. Eva comfortably settled in a corner of the hall. She was observing the people around her, hoping to spot some old acquaintances. Her friends left her alone for a while and went to the smoking area. Eva didn't join them. She could only hold a cigarette after she'd had a drink, and she hadn't been drinking today because she had driven herself to the bar. She felt so good. Even the familiar pain had eased a little, and she felt like dancing. I should suggest to the girls that we go to the club later. And then, Vito stepped up to the microphone. At that moment, Eva didn't yet know his name. A guy with sparkling eyes and a charming smile on his face. A gray, stretched-out t-shirt, faded jeans, and sneakers, everything suited him perfectly. Vito started singing. It was a song about an unattainable beauty who captured the heart of a hardened rocker. The guy's voice was strong and pleasant, but his sense of pitch, well, it was a disaster. Vito couldn't hit the notes at all. Yet, the audience liked his performance. They sang along and clapped. And Vito kept catching Eva's gaze. And Eva realized he was singing just for her. The most heartfelt lines of the song were for her, there was no doubt about it. At the final chords, to make it absolutely clear, the guy approached the stunned Eva, gallantly bent down on one knee like a knight. It was very beautiful. The onlookers watched the scene with interest. Eva could feel their eyes on her and felt a little embarrassed. But the young man didn't seem to care at all. Then the music died down. The guy handed the microphone to someone else and, without asking for permission, plopped down on the beanbag chair next to Eva. In principle, she didn't mind. "Hello, beautiful with the sad eyes," the guy smiled charmingly. "My name's Vito." "And what's your name, beautiful stranger?" Eva looked into his black eyes and realized that something new was beginning in her life. For the first time since breaking up with Andre, Eva felt like a beautiful woman. And she really liked this feeling. They started dating. Vito was a bundle of positive energy, a party person, always joking, telling interesting stories about himself and his friends. By the way, the sociable guy had a ton of friends. Someone was always greeting him or stopping to chat, no matter where he and Eva went. Soon, Vito suggested they live together. On his own. Eva was happy. She liked the atmosphere this person created around him. With him, she forgot about all her problems, didn't think about anything bad, and just enjoyed life. Remembering Andre's reaction, Eva didn't tell Vito that she had an apartment. So, they decided to rent a place together. Both of them worked, so it was affordable for them. In general, Vito looked at many things more simply. It didn't bother him that Eva drove a beautiful car, while he couldn't afford one. He even often asked to drive. He'd put on an exaggeratedly important look, which amused Eva, crank up the music, and speed down the highway with the gas pedal to the floor. Eva felt like she was pretty happy. She had everything. She even had a young man, so cheerful, so easygoing, and he loved her. At least, he said it often. Vito was very different from Andre. He wasn't as reliable and caring, but he had an easygoing personality and knew how to have fun and enjoy life. With him, it was never boring, and Eva liked that. Still, she probably wasn't in love with Vito the way she had once been with Andre. Vito became something of a salvation for her, a lifeline she grabbed onto. Sometimes, Eva learned something about Andre from mutual acquaintances. Every time his name was mentioned, her heart tightened, which led her to believe that her feelings for him hadn't completely faded. It was a strange and not very pleasant feeling. Eva hoped that, with time, it would pass. Vito didn't make long-term plans and didn't think much about the future. He was okay with his unstable job and not so high income. He loved bars, clubs, and parties, and Eva was dragged into all of that. Of course, she didn't mind having fun, but sometimes she got tired of it. Vito simply couldn't live any other way. Everything was going well, and then came the sudden illness. The young man, full of energy and strength, suddenly began to feel unwell. He started getting tired quickly, and he had shortness of breath and dizziness. Eva made him undergo a medical examination. The doctor's verdict was far from encouraging. Vito was diagnosed with a serious illness. Eva couldn't believe it. The image of the cheerful Vito didn't match with any kind of illness. The prognosis without treatment sounded like a sentence. Vito began to focus on his health. He was constantly visiting doctors. It turned out there was treatment, but it was expensive. Free healthcare would take too long, and by that time, his condition could worsen significantly. In the end, Eva offered him the money. He initially refused to take it, but then he thanked her and promised to pay it back. At that moment, he looked unusually serious. Eva, without any regrets or doubts, withdrew the accumulated amount from her account, savings from several years. It was quite a decent sum of money. It could have bought a new, mid-range car. "I really appreciate this," Vito said earnestly, receiving the money. "Now I'll do everything for you. First, beat your illness. You can be sure of that." Vito's usual smile appeared on his face, and everything immediately seemed right again. Vito had just started his treatment. He was getting drips, and expensive medications were being prescribed. The results didn't take long to show. His energy and enthusiasm quickly returned. Eva was happy about this, but Vito took it for granted. He didn't seem like someone who had received such a serious diagnosis, and he tried not to think about his illness too much. Moreover, now that he was receiving the proper treatment, his recovery was progressing rapidly. However, he couldn't work like before, so for the time being, Eva became the main breadwinner for their little family. But this didn't bother her at all. Relationships were about caring for each other, love. Eva felt that Vito was a simple and straightforward guy. He had such sincere eyes. Until recently, Eva thought she knew Vito inside out. After all, he had never hidden anything from her. Even the truths that made him look unappealing. Vito openly admitted his mistakes, and it looked almost endearing. He would lower his head, speak in a soft voice, and smile apologetically. But the conversation Eva accidentally overheard on the landing changed everything. Eva realized that she had been living under the same roof for almost a year with someone she didn't know at all, with a real monster, a skilled manipulator, and an actor worthy of an Oscar. Vito had only been pretending to be the simple, honest guy. In reality, he was a terrifying person. "This disgusting creature will get what she deserves, she'll cry her eyes out." These words, spoken by Vito, made Eva stop and freeze one floor below. Vito had never said anything so aggressive before. And his tone was completely unfamiliar now. There was anger, irritation, even hatred in his voice. Eva pressed herself against the wall. Vito was right nearby, and she could hear him clearly. She wanted to run away, to not know this truth, but, of course, she couldn't leave now. "She just doesn't realize who she's dealing with," Vito continued. "I've already thought it all through. One shot, two birds. Even three." "What?" "Of course, I'm sure. I know what I'm doing. I'm going to get back at that bitch for humiliating me, and I'll even make some money off it. She owes me for everything. Eva was trying to understand what was going on. Of course, it was nothing good. But what exactly? Who was Vito trying to get revenge on? And how? It seemed like it was some woman, which made it even more terrifying. What's she going to do? I'm her father. That idiot even put me in the birth certificate. She wanted to tie me to her and her little brat. Well, now let her clean up the mess. Vito laughed hoarsely, in a nasty way. Oh, stop. What's she going to do to me? What consequences? I'll scare her so much that she won't dare go to the police. I'll have her puppy in my hands. I'll take him. The possibilities are endless, you know? Eva took a deep breath. So, what does this mean? Vito was talking about kidnapping some woman's child. And, apparently, it was his son. Because Vito was listed as the father on this boy's birth certificate. A cold shiver ran down Eva's spine. This was a horrible crime. She had to understand the details. I've got the money, you know, Vito spoke more calmly to his interlocutor. Eva's been sending money for my so-called treatment. Such a fool, believes everything I tell her. I just need a car, something unremarkable. I'm counting on your help. No, don't try to talk me out of it, I've already made up my mind. I need the money, you understand? I want to leave here, somewhere by the sea. Settle down, start a new life. Maybe even open my own bar. I've always dreamed of it. Carolina deserves all of this, you know. She owes me. It's time to pay up. Carolina. Eva had already heard the name Carolina from Vito earlier, and it happened completely by accident. That evening, Eva was returning home by bus. Her car was in the shop. It was already late, and the area wasn't the safest. It was dark around her. She hurried to her building, listening to the strange sounds and rustling noises. Her blistered heel was hurting terribly. The new sandals had rubbed her skin raw. Despite her anxiety and desire to get to her cozy room as soon as possible, the girl sat down by the entrance of one of the neighboring buildings. She gladly took off the uncomfortable sandal and let the cool evening breeze touch her sore spot. Suddenly, Eva heard Vito's voice and was very happy. What a relief that he wasn't at work anymore and that they had run into each other like this. Now she would go home with him. With him, it wasn't scary at all. Moreover, he would even carry her in his arms. Eva had no doubt about it. Vito had already recovered and was just like he used to be. She wouldn't even have to ask. She would just tell him about her sore blister, and Vito would offer to help. He always took such tender care of her. Meanwhile, Vito was calling into the intercom of a building entrance. He must have friends living here as well. Eva was about to call out to him when a woman's voice answered, full of either fear or anger. Get out of here before I call the police. You know what I need, Carolina, Vito responded harshly. You know what to do if you want me to leave you alone. Eva felt jealousy rise in her heart. It was definitely jealousy. She didn't like that her boyfriend was talking to another woman, and like this, too. It sounded as if they were close people having a quarrel. Eva decided that Vito was talking to his ex-girlfriend, and judging by his emotional tone, the feelings between them hadn't completely faded yet. Go to hell. The woman pressed the intercom button to cut him off. Vito swore angrily and even punched the door with his fist. He turned around and started heading toward his home. That's when he noticed the stunned Eva sitting on the bench. Baby, what are you doing here? He asked in a completely different tone. Before Eva was Vito, the one she knew well, sensitive, kind, and good. Eva told him about her foot. Just as she had expected, Vito easily picked her up in his arms and carried her to the house. Of course, Eva asked questions. She didn't hide the fact that she had overheard Vito's conversation with the owner of the rare name, Carolina. She's the girl I used to date, Vito explained reluctantly. We broke up badly. She's a dishonest person. Carolina owes me a lot of money. She tricked me once. I'd forget about the money if I didn't have to deal with her. But, you see, with this illness of mine, treatment requires money. I can't really work now. That's why I'm trying to collect the debt from her now." "Don't go to her anymore," Eva asked. "If you need money, I'll get it. Just don't get involved with her, please." "You've already helped me a lot," Vito shook his head. "If it weren't for you, who knows where I'd be right now." And now, in this conversation on the landing between the floors, Vito once again mentioned Carolina. The very same woman, of course. Eva didn't think Vito had many women in his life with such a name. The longer Eva listened to Vito, the clearer the situation became. It seemed that Vito and Carolina had a child together. Vito was even listed as the father on the boy's birth certificate. For some reason, this woman didn't want to communicate with Vito and was against him having access to the child. Vito himself wasn't eager to see the child because he only loved money. And he had found a way to get what he wanted. Vito was planning something awful to take the child. Carolina, as Eva understood, was a wealthy woman and was willing to give Vito anything he asked for in exchange for her son. The person Vito was talking to, whom Eva, of course, couldn't hear, was clearly trying to talk him out of it. But Vito countered every argument with one of his own in support of his decision. "The police won't do anything to me. According to all the papers, I'm the father of this little brat. She thought she could keep me that way, now she regrets it, but it's too late. A father has the right to take his child at any time. It won't even be considered kidnapping." He had thought it all through, devious, calculating, and unscrupulous. And Eva had trusted him, just like Carolina had once done. Vito finished his terrible conversation, smoked his cigarette, and went back into the apartment. Eva, of course, didn't go up. She sat down weakly on the cold step and began to think. What should she do now? Vito was a monster, that was obvious. What to do with Vito, she would deal with later. For now, she could lie to him about an urgent business trip. Eva would be better off staying in her apartment. She couldn't stay alone with this criminal now. The main thing was to warn Carolina. Thanks to that incident, Eva knew which building, and even which entrance, the woman lived in. She was lucky that the girl had such a distinctive name, so it wouldn't be hard to find the right apartment. Eva took her mobile phone out of her bag, dialed her boss, and said she was feeling unwell. The boss let her take the whole day off. Perfect. Now, Eva had enough time to help Carolina. The woman probably had no idea about the storm clouds gathering above her head. As she left the entrance, Eva headed straight for the building where Carolina lived. She dialed the first apartment she came across. An elderly woman answered. Eva asked her to call for Carolina. "Sweetie, she lives in apartment 153, the old woman replied and hung up. Just like that, Eva easily found the apartment number. With trembling fingers, she dialed the number 153 on the intercom panel. She was ready for no one to answer. Carolina was probably at work. But after 2 rings, a woman's voice came through. "7th floor, come on up." Carolina was clearly expecting a delivery. Well, Eva entered the building and called for the elevator. The door to apartment 153 was slightly open. Carolina was already expecting someone. "Oh, so you didn't bring the pizza?" The woman at the door smiled. Tall, beautiful, about 10 years older than Eva, very well-groomed and stylish. "Sorry, I thought it was the delivery." "Mom, the pizza's here." A 4-year-old boy ran to the door. This was Vito's son. The resemblance was striking. And it would have been fine if it were only the resemblance. "Tomas, no, go to your room," Carolina said to her son. The boy immediately obeyed. "So, what's this about?" Eva took a deep breath. As she had been preparing to talk to Carolina, she hadn't even thought about how to start the conversation. "It's a very long and difficult story," Eva finally said. "First of all, I need to warn you that you and your child are in danger." Fear flashed across Carolina's face, but she quickly regained her composure. Vito, she clarified. She immediately understood what it was about. Eva nodded. Come in, we need to talk seriously. Carolina led Eva into the kitchen. The apartment was stylishly and expensively furnished. It was clear that the owner wasn't short on money. Well, that's probably why Vito was hoping to take advantage of her. A clever guy. Eva told her everything she had overheard on the landing. Carolina listened without interrupting. Her face became more and more puzzled as Eva spoke. He will do it, she said when Eva finished. He's a terrible person, he'll stop at nothing. But now you know everything. We have to stop him somehow. Maybe you should leave, go somewhere. That won't help. I already ran away from him once, to this city. I bought an apartment here, thinking everything was behind me, but Vito found me, rented a place nearby, started threatening me, and now he wants to take our son. That's terrible. Is there really nothing we can do? Carolina calmed down a little. I don't even know how to thank you for the warning. If it weren't for you, he would have taken Tomas and twisted me around his finger. I would have given him everything, just to get my son back. At first, Vito seemed like the perfect man. I thanked fate for our chance meeting. Carolina was the owner of her own business when she met Vito. He was a charming, modest guy who approached her in a club where Carolina and her colleagues were celebrating another victory. He was so charming, so open, and so young. He showered her with compliments and gave her admiring looks. Carolina knew he was younger and their statuses were very different, but she couldn't help herself. She was swept off her feet by him, and that was it. It hadn't happened to her in a long time. Usually, Carolina looked at things rationally and assessed everything from a practical perspective. But with him, she just melted. Vito has a talent. It's like he can immediately see what a person wants, spots their weaknesses, and guesses their desires so he can achieve his goals. He's a born manipulator. Eva nodded. She couldn't disagree with Carolina. After hearing that eavesdropped conversation, many things about her relationship with Vito now looked different. He had made it so that Eva herself offered him money. And she had even been glad that he took it. In the end, the mature, successful Carolina lost her head over the charming guy. They started a passionate romance, which led to pregnancy. Carolina was very happy about this. Her age was already a concern. Her peers had long been taking care of babies, while Carolina's personal life wasn't working out. It was understandable. Successful women like her often scared men away. And then came Vito, who didn't care about the little details or societal conventions. Carolina happily showered him with gifts. She liked seeing the smile on his face. She liked making him happy. The news of her pregnancy didn't exactly excite Vito. Carolina understood and accepted it. After all, he was a young guy, still hadn't had his fill of life, wasn't planning a family just yet. In the end, Vito disappeared. Not completely, of course. He stayed in the same city, continued to hang out in bars and cafes, flirting with girls, but completely cut off all ties with Carolina. As for me, it's shameful to even think back. I was probably under the spell of his charm. It hurt, it was humiliating. I tried to get him back, I called, I humbled myself. I even waited outside clubs and bars. What a fool I was. I stood with my big belly early in the morning and watched as Vito came out arm in arm with some girl. Maybe the hormones played a role. And I'm just like that. I've always gotten what I wanted, and this was such a blow. I didn't understand who Vito really was back then. He was an ordinary gold digger, a man who liked to have fun at the expense of wealthy women, not at all interested in serious relationships, and probably even incapable of having real feelings. When Tomas was born, I put Vito down as the father. This was my way of trying to hold the irresponsible father accountable, though he was carefully running away from it. 2 years passed, and I calmed down. She had almost forgotten about Vito. All her thoughts were now occupied with Tomas, her charming and clever little boy. Life was good for Carolina. A healthy child, prosperity, business, good income. And then suddenly, Vito, the one Carolina had once chased after, appeared on his own. At first, the woman was happy. Of course, there could be no talk of any relationship with him anymore, but she was perfectly fine with Tomas having a relationship with his father. Male attention and all that. She thought that Vito had matured, realized his mistakes. But the thing turned out to be something else. Vito needed money. He said I owed him for stealing his youth. He yelled as if I had used him to have a child, and said all sorts of nonsense. It all boiled down to one thing: Vito was demanding money. He knew I had it and was asking for it. As he put it, he needed compensation for my deception. Can you imagine? At first, Carolina was surprised, then outraged, and finally, she laughed in Vito's face. But he didn't give up. Vito began a real pursuit. Now, Vito would wait for Carolina and Tomas near stores, outside the office, or simply at the entrance to the building. He would threaten them, sometimes beg, and plead with Carolina to understand his situation. My mistake was that I gave him small amounts of money at first, just to make him leave us alone, but that didn't help. Well, it did, but only for a short while. It was hard to decide to move. She had to settle her business affairs and change a lot. But Carolina had no regrets. Once she was in another city, she felt safe. But he still found us after a while, and his demands grew. Carolina shook her head sadly. Now, he's even trying to take Tomas. This is too much. Maybe the police? Eva suggested. I'll be a witness, I heard everything. There's no proof, that's one thing, Carolina sighed. Besides, Vito is right. Tomas is his son. A father has the right to see his child. But it's not Tomas he wants, it's my money. I'd give him everything if I were sure he'd leave us alone. But he won't leave us alone if we go by the law. People like him need to be dealt with by their own methods. Do you have a plan? Eva asked. By the look on Carolina's face, she could tell the woman was seriously thinking about something. Sort of, a plan B for an extreme situation. I wouldn't want to, but it seems like this extreme situation has already arrived. Eva was walking along the promenade with Andre. Yes, they were together again. They were walking hand in hand, preparing for their wedding. It was going to be a beautiful celebration. A lavish banquet, an interesting program, a famous host, and many guests. Among them would be Carolina and little Tomas. The boy would even be entrusted with carrying the pillow with the wedding rings. All this time, after the breakup with Eva, Andre had been actively developing his business, and now he was the owner of an auto repair shop, bringing in a stable and quite good income. He did it for Eva, the girl he loved more than life. Andre was willing to move mountains for her, and now he had achieved what he wanted. The guy no longer felt awkward about the fact that Eva was the daughter of wealthy parents and a very successful woman, while he had been practically broke. Now, Andre was no longer in that position. He was a young, promising entrepreneur, fully capable of paying for a dinner at a restaurant and even a trip to the sea. I was a fool, I understand that, he admitted to Eva. I was terribly self-conscious, almost ruined everything with my own hands, but now it's all in the past. The separation proved to me that my feelings for you are something incredible, unique. There will never be anything like it again. Will you forgive me? Andre came to Eva's office, waited for her for a while, watching for her. When he saw her come out of the building, he rushed to her with a bouquet of flowers. Andre spoke to Eva in very sincere and heartfelt words, looking at her in such a way that her head was spinning. So, you'll forgive me? Instead of answering, Eva hugged Andre tightly and pressed herself against him. It was him, Andre, her beloved, the real one, her own. Only when she was close to him did Eva realize how much she had missed him. He stroked her back and promised that everything would be fine now. Eva believed him and melted with happiness. She, of course, told Andre the story about Vito and Carolina. Andre knew that Eva had been seeing someone during their time apart, but he could never have imagined the danger she had been in. If only I had been there, this horrible thing wouldn't have happened to you. Yes, but who knows what would have happened to Carolina and Tomas then? Eva shook her head. Vito was far away now. He would never show up in this city again. Vito was a coward, despite all his aggression. After everything that had happened, Eva clearly understood this. Carolina had hired someone. She didn't go into details, but the general idea was clear. Carolina would never have turned to these people if she hadn't been threatened with losing her child. She couldn't risk Tomas, so she paid someone to talk to Vito and make him understand things. It happened one early summer morning. Carolina and Tomas were leaving the building when, out of nowhere, Vito appeared. He rushed toward them, tried to grab the child from the woman's arms. He thought he had planned everything perfectly. Vito didn't know they were being watched. He was planning to use force to take the child from Carolina, who, of course, would be caught off guard. Vito wanted to take the baby to a nearby city. He had already rented an apartment there with the money Eva had given him. He was planning to live there with the child, waiting for money from Carolina. He was sure that the frightened mother would pay up. But Carolina was ready for the attack, thanks to Eva. Two strong men, who had been keeping an eye on the mother and child recently, jumped out of a car parked near the entrance. They grabbed Vito, subdued him, shoved him into the car, and took him somewhere. Somewhere where they had a detailed and thorough conversation with him. After that, Vito disappeared. Not in a physical sense, he just left the city. He packed his things and was gone. He didn't remind anyone of himself again, and it's unlikely that he ever will. Carolina hinted to Eva that these people were professionals in their field and knew how to persuade. What a relief that you accidentally overheard Vito's conversation and then found me and warned me. Carolina shared her thoughts with Eva after everything was over. If it weren't for you. They were friends now. It turned out they had a lot in common. And Vito has good taste, Carolina joked about it. Eva smiled. Well, that's definitely true. People say it's true. There wouldn't have been happiness if the misfortune hadn't helped. Thanks to Vito, Eva found a friend and regained love. For that, she was grateful to him, as strange as it might sound.
If you're enjoying it as well, leave a like and subscribe to the channel.